Okay, hola all, welcome back to Soul Mechanics. Please step into my office, have a motherfucking seat. Before I begin here, I should like to request that anybody watching puts in, positive vibes, good intentions, well-wishing in general, prayers, what have you, for my roommate Richard. He's in the hospital. He's got pretty severe heart complications. He might be in trouble here, and I'm going to go ahead and dedicate the following video to him, and I had the intention of making it for him anyway, and but for now I just want to ask that people put forth, positive intent, and put out a good vibe for him, please, for his healing, for his health, his recovery. Anyways, we were speaking recently in the Remnants program. I think I posted for the initiative too that I had been doing some chemical-induced resets. I spoke of it in one of the previous videos too, and I've been advised against speaking too in depth about it, so I'm not going to here. But anybody who's familiar, in the field of psychedelics should understand where I'm coming from, or what I'm in the midst of doing. Essentially, I'm intending to launch, kickstart the psychedelics exploration program for the Remnants program, and I'm dipping my toes in the water here, prepping myself to get back in the field, because it has been a while. And I was feeling pretty depressed lately, so I felt as though it was something that needed doing anyway. But yeah, we're well into the process of that. But I got inspired because of it, and I started combing the internet again, looking for other people's stories about, their psychedelic experiences, and I ran into this dude named Shane Moss, who you will have noticed I post a link to his story, the story that I found of his first DMT experience for the Remnants program. And the way that they presented it, and like with the cartoony effects and shit in the video, I'll put a link to it for it here too, but it was perfect. It damn near perfectly encapsulated the experience as best as human language and human interpretation can do, at least for the most part. And I mean, it's the actual experience of it is, you can watch as many videos as you want, you can listen to as many stories, you can even have a firm understanding of the neuropeptides in play and how the chemicals in the brain are responding, and what's really happening in the brain, and still just be worlds away from having the first fucking clue as to what happened, what you should be expecting with it. It's something entirely alien, and until you have experienced it, you will have. There's no way you can imagine what it actually does, what happens. But I'm going to go ahead, because I was inspired by his story, I want to retell my story, because I did it on the other channel a while back, and I dragged on and on in it about things that were not entirely irrelevant, but I dragged on and on. Not many people were likely to have paid attention to the whole thing, so for the sake of brevity, I'm going to try and get through the story, quickly and simply here. But before I do, I want to say that upon further inspection, looking into this Shane Moss guy, I found a podcast he did with Joe Rogan, which the both of them are comedians heavily into the psychedelic arena. They utilize their experiences, especially in psychedelics, to produce and accommodate humor and discipline people's humor for the most part, in a manner of speaking. So they both, obviously you guys know Joe, but this Shane Moss guy too, the both of them are very powerful initiatives, or very powerful operatives of the initiative, sorry, busting their asses out there to do a lot of good. And I'm going to post a link for this video in the podcast. I'll give you a link for the podcast episode, but I'm going to post a link for this video in the podcast comments. Hopefully Joe Rogan actually watches this at some point. Joe, if you are watching this, I want to say that some of the shit you talked about in that video, in that episode where you talked about the Kundalini impulse, activation of the Kundalini impulse, accessing memory that's stored in the DNA. Now, DNA itself is made of memory, like everything is made of memory. What we consider to be physical constructs are essentially constructed of memory, but memories are indeed stored in the DNA, and yes, you can access them through that Kundalini impulse, and you can in fact access DMT-like states, and it's very similar. And I'm thinking really the only difference is going to be a matter of interpretation, or a matter of where you're coming from with it. But you're onto something there with what we've delved into what we call time mechanics, and what you're speaking of. A huge proponent of that, or a precursor to that, is going to be the experiments you spoke of with the citrus spray in the air, causing, creating an association with the rats. They did an experiment where they zap rats and they spray citrus in the air, and then when the rats have children, the children, by the passing on of the DNA, the genetic structure, they actually have that association built in, where when they smell that citrus, they have a threat response because they remember that. And that's coming very close to understanding time mechanics, looking at the placebo effect. And yes, the Kundalini practice is a key to all of this. And I mean, you have the sense depth tank, dude. You have access to whatever compounds you might need. You have access to this Shane Moss guy, presents a lot of excellent theories. Like, he's spot on with a lot of the shit that he has to say. The only trouble here is that he seems to be thinking there's a differentiation between what people consider to be spiritual experiences and what people consider to be psychedelic experiences, which there is not. That's the only stumbling block this guy's got to get over, is that there is no difference. And Joe Rogan speaks to this. He speaks to this a lot. It's one of his primary things, and I'm going to speak to this in a following video too, directly, and cover that as best I can. But for Joe, if you're watching this, I can give you leads on that. If you want, you can check out my channel. The Principal Dynamics playlist and the Anatomy of Identity playlists are going to provide you all the values you need to continue, pulling at that thread. But you're very close to something particularly powerful there. And getting across the concept of time mechanics and what you're finding there with that, what you're onto, the ideas you have. If you go further down that avenue, you investigate that, and you do come to the same conclusions we have, which you're coming close to already, you're a big deal. Like, a lot of people, you're very influential, you get your voices heard all over, you're a very powerful voice for the initiative, which, in case you're unaware, if you don't know about, like, the works of Dolores Cannon's going to be the best place to look for this, but there is a worldwide initiative in play. So I'm going to go ahead and bet that at least Joe Rogan's probably well aware of this, or at least has heard of it, knows about it to some extent. But there is a worldwide endeavor to assist in, humanity moving into further stages of our development as a species, and you are an operative of this initiative. So if you were unaware before, welcome to the war, sir. In any case, Shane Moss presents the theory that he thinks that, and we know that dimethyltriptamine is produced in the brain and the pineal gland, by the pineal gland, and that it's involved in the process of dreaming and the process of death. So his idea is that when you utilize DMT as a triggering mechanism when you smoke it, or use ayahuasca maybe, but more so when you smoke it, it actually tricks the brain into thinking that you're dying, and produces what essentially amounts to a near-death experience, a kind of crossing over the threshold of the boundary into what lies beyond momentarily. And that's a very amazing, like, that's perfect. I'm going to go ahead and, it's pretty obvious that that's very likely what's happening. For the most part, that is what's happening, because that's what that's why, because the brain is utilizing that chemical for that particular avenue, that avenue of interest, that procedure, as it were. That's how the brain does that. So, that's obviously what's happening, but very likely the reasoning behind it as well. Anyways, to get to the story, so I had, as I stated before when I first told the story, I'm an alchemist in the purest, truest sense of the word, or I have been my entire life. Like, when I was a kid, we didn't have internet, and people weren't like it. you weren't even really allowed access to information regarding this sort of stuff. It was still very taboo for the most part, and there's not a lot of information available about it, and it was tough to come by. So, you know, everything that I've experienced regarding psychedelics and drugs in general, it's all been shit that I've practiced. You know, I've experimented using myself as a proverbial lab rat for the most part. And you know, I've done all the experimentation firsthand with no prior instruction and nobody to really guide me, so that, you know, everything I did was kind of stumbling in the dark, but eventually I did get a firm handle on how it all works. And I tried every combination. You know, there's only a few drugs I haven't really gotten to try. Like, I haven't gotten to try MDMA or ecstasy. I haven't gotten to try methamphetamines. I haven't gotten to try cocaine, really. I did cocaine once, but you know, I've smoked cocaine since then, so I have an idea as to what I should have expected from it, and it did not deliver along, you know, within that criteria at all. So I'm thinking it was either fake or at least so shitty that it's not to be considered a you know, it doesn't count. So but aside from that, and like some of the stupid shit like huff and glue and all that crap, I've never done that. I did a lot of the OTC shit for a while, because there's a lot to be found there. Regarding what we think of as being hallucination, which again does not really exist. I'm going to get deep into that. That's an important factor. But, you know, I had done all the trippy shit, the LSD, the psilocybin, even the salvia, which comes kind of close. It's similar in a manner of speaking to DMT, but not really. Like, it's very different, but it has a kind of a similar sort of perceptual texture to it, you could say. But you know, I had felt as though when I got the DMT, when I got a hold of it, and the DMT is known amongst the community of psychonauts to be like the pinnacle of a trip experience. Like, that's going to be, you know, I figured that's what I've been training for all this time, and I figured I was pretty well prepped for it. Like, I had done everything else. I had overcome the demons within me, and I had, you know, especially like lucid dreaming, dream works, projection, and then psychedelic experiences. I'd covered all the bases. I'd taken care of my own value system. I figured I'd been pretty well prepared for it, and I you know, was ready for what would come. And that turned out to not be the case at all. I don't think it really could be the case. Honestly, I don't think that anybody could be prepared for this without having experienced it already. It's like there's no way that you can anticipate what's going to happen here. It is the most abrupt and brutally astonishing experience you will have, that I've ever had at least. And a lot of people talk about, like, they're going to take 3 big bong hits or something like that, and you know, hold it in and really push it, and then they're going to kind of go through like this tunnel and rocket ship into another world. That did not happen for me. What happened for me, and I'm theorizing, maybe there's a few theories I have as to why this happened the way it did, but one that I didn't think of is this could have been like that other sort of DMT, the 5M DMT or whatever it's called. I don't know what it's called, but it comes from like poison frogs or some such shit. And it's super strong, I guess. So this might have been why this happened, but there are other theories I have regarding it that I've already spoken to in the previous telling. But I took one small hit because I had done salvia, and it freaked me out, and I was kind of afraid of it. I didn't know what to expect, really. And it's like, you don't trip like if you've done mushrooms or something, and you know, like, the world comes alive and things move around and you see things you never saw before, and just the whole world shifts and morphs and changes and can become so weird and distorted. That is not what happens with DMT. Like, you are not tripping in the world. You are not experiencing any sort of a physiological response. You are gone. You are somewhere else entirely. And I took a small hit because I was weary of it, and when I tasted it, the taste of it and the scent of it, a lot of people will report this, it has this very nostalgic, familiar kind of flavor to it that is like, to me, it's like the mothballs in your grandma's perfume closet is what it seems like to me, or like the mold in your basement, or growing up as a kid or something like that. It's very nostalgic and familiar. And as soon as I tasted that and that came over me, I knew what was coming. Like, I had remembered, like, you remember something when you go, like, you remember something you had forgotten your entire life when you have this experience. And I knew what was coming, so I didn't hold that hit in. I took one tiny hit out of a regular ass fucking glass pipe, not a bong or anything like that, just one tiny hit, like a tester hit, and I held it in for like 2 seconds. I let it out, and I noticed something out of in my periphery. Nothing specific, just something, and I looked over to see what it was that was moving in my periphery, and I noticed, like, the colors on the table and shit start to emboss, like a layer of color had come off of well, like a sheen, a cosmetic kind of sheen, and then it just started to lift and kind of stream off. The color just stripped off, and it started coming at me in ribbons. The color was just stripping off in ribbons, and I knew, like, I remembered at that point, I knew what I was in for, and all I could say was, oh shit, here we go. And I think I closed my eyes. I'm not even sure if I actually did that, but I leaned back, and I laid back on the floor, and just, like, a seamless, perfect hole, I didn't even have an edge. It was just like a hole opened and just expanded, and I was in this giant dome that was made of just everything in this dome that I could see around me. The whole dome itself was made of minuscule little diamond eyeballs. That's what they looked like to me, or that's what they seemed like. And they were all watching me, and I had the distinct impression, the understanding that I was one with this world, and it was watching me. As I'm looking at it, it was addressing me, it was watching me, and all these little diamonds, they looked just like perfect, like this world was fucking wax. It was just, it was geometrically sound in a way that I had not noticed this world is not before. Like, this world is kind of wishy-washy. Everything you see here, especially if you've done psychedelics before, you know, if you really look at things, they can kind of morph a little bit, and they don't really hold. They're like, there's a kind of a dreamy quality to this, to a certain extent. Just like when you have a dream, it's super exaggerated, but that, you know, things are not geometrically sound here, but this world is fucking perfect. And, you know, like I've said before, if I had to choose one or the other as being the real world, it would not be this one. So, I'm of the understanding that this world is watching me, and that everything's focused on me, and I'm like the star of the show here, and I'm on walking on this sheet of just, like, perfectly, like, so wax and just sheen, fucking perfect, like glass almost, but it was like not even, it was like a crystal sheet that was so wax and perfect, it was like not even there, like walking on a sheet of nothing. And I think I was actually walking in Scumaden, and I'm trying to explain what's going on to Boob. He's sitting there with me, watching me do this, and I'm trying to communicate to him, like, exactly what I'm seeing and what's happening, but I'm pretty sure all that really I actually got across, it came out of my mouth, was, what? Like, something to that effect, like, what? And just, I started walking, and every step I took was like 30 yards, and I'm moving very quickly toward the edge of this dome, and I see something there at the edge, moving, like, rapidly. And when I get up to it, when I finally get to to this thing moving at the edge, it's a person that, it looks like a person that has a suit jacket, like I'm always wearing a suit jacket, and he looked like Two-Face, like he was split down the middle and had, like, he was checkerboard, like black and white, and he was embossed, but he was two-dimensional, and when he moved around, it was like he could move around and flip and shit, but he was like a two-dimensional kind of embossed, cartoonish figure of a person, and he looked like when I started doing this, when I made this channel and I started watching my own videos, when I have the light on one side of my face, that's what he looked like. Like, he looked like I was seeing an image of myself, but, like, super exaggerated. He looked like a mixture between the Joker and Two-Face from Batman. And what I think this is like what people say they experience. They meet with a shaman figure or a god presence in the DMT scenario. Everybody says this. And what I think it actually is like a representation of the primary archetype of your personality. And this dude seemed to me to be like the archetype of the trickster. And what he was doing, he was moving his hands around really rapidly, and I couldn't see what he was doing, but I had the distinct impression, the understanding that what this guy was doing was he was reaching behind the curtain of life, and he was manipulating the pulleys and levers and manipulating the props of the stage play that was my life. Like, he was the director and I was the star of the show, and he was making my life happen, essentially. And he had this look on his face like he was just psyched, like he was having so much fun. He's like smiling at me. He didn't say anything, but I had the distinct understanding that that's what he was doing. And he never said anything to me, and really, I was flabbergasted by it, but all that I could really think at the time, and I believe I actually tried to say this, I might have actually said this, is I was like, this fucking guy is obnoxious. Like, this dude is seriously obnoxious. And I was just like, and I blew him off, and I turned to walk away. And it was starting to fade at this point, and I told Boob, I'm like, I think I might throw up, and I went into the bathroom, and I felt like, here we are again. Like, that's the feeling I had, like, we're back here again. Like, it was just this foreverness, eternality feeling, like I had always been there, forever and ever and ever, but I had just forgotten it momentarily, and now I was remembering for a moment. And that's the nostalgic quality to it that I don't like that. That's the only thing I don't like about it, is that morose kind of nostalgia. But you know, that's the only, aside from that, there's no alterations in my physiology, no alterations, there's no like body buzz or anything of that sort. It was just, I was perfectly coherent, perfectly clear-headed, in a completely different world, just perfectly fucking lucid. No, there's nothing, no like intoxication to it. It was just, it takes you to another fucking place altogether. But by this time it was wearing down, and when I finally got out of the bathroom and went and sat with Boob, I wanted to tell him what was happening, but when I looked at him and I saw him looking back at me, waiting for me to say something, I had this impression, like this very distinct impression, this understanding came over me that I was like, I think I've been him this whole time. Like, I'm looking at him and I'm thinking, have I been Boob this whole time? Like, how did I not know that? Like, I understood myself as being him, and it was like a trick that was being played on me that you know, I've had many experiences like this before, so I know what was happening there, but, I mean, it was all very intense at the time, but, and then it wore off, and I just started laughing because I couldn't explain what the fuck had just happened, and it took me a while to kind of put my thoughts together on it, but yeah, it was beautiful. It was very intense. As I said, it's outstanding, and anybody who's been following along with the channel, you should notice a lot of values presented in that experience that speak directly to some of the concepts that we've been working with that really, you know, give a kind of a background to some of the values we have in play. So you know, we'll get further into this. Of course, we're going to continue with the psychedelics program. Joe Rogan, if you actually are watching, firstly, you fucking kick ass. We all love you here. You're a tremendous asset. We all appreciate everything that you're doing. And if you want to contact me, go right ahead. I'd be more than happy to give you. I do have a lot of the answers that you're looking for if you want them, or if you want to lead on it. You know, at least I can give you my take, and it might help you out. It will help you out. But I mean, you and I have slightly differing understandings, but not really. You're very close to having the same understanding that we have here. So, yeah, it'd be great. I'd love to talk to you. You got to work with that Shane Moss guy, dude. You guys got to get together and get those theories together and make that shit work. And you're on to things there that our scientific endeavors are not going to encounter for a while, like maybe even a few years from now. So if you can get those ideas out there, you could get us all moving a hell of a lot faster. You are really on to something important there. So like I said, I can help you out with that if you want. But anyways, thank you all for watching. Thank you all for being here. Keelah Taerve Uni Siari. Namaste.